19 days ago, on January 1st of this year, I released a statement that started a conversation. It's a conversation about principles for building positive education futures. It's a conversation for evolving learning. The statement is called Manifesto 15. It's a public declaration or a vision for education futures. And the first 19 days since its release, it's been read and distributed by thousands, signed by hundreds, and volunteers across the world have translated it into 9 languages and more along the way. It's 19 days. So I'm just really thankful for the interest and success of this project, and I'm just here to share with you a bit of the manifesto and what I've learned so far. Because 19 days later, we find ourselves driving a new global conversation about learning. So, I'm a nerd, and throughout my life, I've always been curious about the future. I grew up on classic science fiction, read a lot of Omni magazine, I was a big fan of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. And, this kind of carries over into our professional lives, these interests we have as kids. And I put a lot of focus in the work that I do into investigating potential and likely futures for how we will work and live together across the planet. And there's some big implications for education and learning as well, because we have to prepare kids for jobs that will exist in the future. And so we needed a manifesto for learning, a statement of principles for evolving education, and thus Manifesto 15 was born. After I completed a draft, I invited others to join in reviewing and editing, and also adding on their names as co-authors, if they believed in the principles. So at the moment, we're a group of 33 scholars, teachers, artists, designers, thinkers, and even medical doctors. Every bit of this work is released under the most liberal Creative Commons license possible to allow others, like all of us in this room, to create remixes and create their own ideas based on this work. And the perspective of the document is global. There is no distinction between the developed and the developing countries in this. It is just as much north-south as it is south-north in its perspective. This is not pandering to the economic elite. It's not pandering to the core industrialized nations. This is about creating futures that we can all thrive in. A manifesto is simply a statement of principles. And we don't pretend to have all the best answers or the best ideas, and we don't even expect anybody to agree with it completely. That said, the response has been really phenomenal. So let me share what we have to say. Here's our first principle. We believe the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And this is a quote actually from William Gibson. Of course, the future is always in the future, but the future that we will experience, by and large, already exists in bits and pieces here and there. The biggest problem in education is that we're really deeply focused on the past. We teach the history of literature, for example, but not the future of writing. We teach historically important mathematical concepts, but we don't work on creating new maths that will need to solve future problems. We believe that we need to create a futures orientation in our praxis, in the action through teaching. Second principle, 1.0 schools cannot teach 3.0 kids, right? Our education systems are built on an 18th century model for creating loyal factory workers and government bureaucrats. It was very clear back then for who we were working for and why. Now in societies that expect to have fewer factories and maybe even have smaller governments, we really need to reframe what we're educating for, why, and for whom. And if kids are to succeed in this world, we cannot expect the old 1.0 modeled schools to be their best option in education. We need to build 3.0 schools. Our third point, we strongly believe that kids are people too. All kids and students must be treated and respected as human beings with universal rights and responsibilities. This is inclusion at a very fundamental level. In schools, this means that kids must have an active say in the choices regarding their learning, including how schools are run, how kids learn, when they learn, and all other areas of their daily life that are impacted by this as well. The thrill of jumping off a cliff by deciding to do yourself is a high you'll never have if somebody else pushes you off, right? I don't want somebody to push me off a cliff. If I go off a cliff, I want to do it myself, and I want bungee cord at least, The point is that failing is a natural part of human learning, and it's not as effective as somebody pushes you into something. Now again, in education, we seem to assume that people will not learn anything if we don't tell them what to do. And this is simply not true. Rather, we need to help each other discover our own thrills, discover our own passions within our own learning journeys, and support them. This means that we'll make mistakes once in a while. The teacher's role is to make sure that the decisions we make are well balanced. After all, failing is okay, but we don't want to create failures. It's been said, don't value what we measure, measure what we value. We've become so obsessed with measuring everything that we think that we can even measure in education. And our governments have bought into this cult of educational measurement. And through our government obsessions over regimes such as PISA, we've somehow let the OECD become the Ministry of Education for the world. In effect, on a very global scale, nation to nation, we're competing to be the best-looking kid in an ugly family. We need to put an end to compulsory, one-size-fits-all testing and senseless measurement. We need to create authentic opportunities for growing in areas that we value. We ask the question, well, technology is cool, but if technology is the answer, what was the question? We are so obsessed with new technologies, but we have very little understanding what they're for. Technologies present themselves as great opportunities for improving our work, but in education, we have a tendency to use new technologies to do the same old stuff. And this is an incredible waste. Smart boards have replaced blackboards. iPads are replacing books. This is like building a nuclear power plant to power a horse cart. It just doesn't make much sense. And we will continue to squander our opportunities in using new technologies in education until we better understand and transform what we are learning for, and then the pathways for how we will learn will become much more clear. Our research shows that digital skills are invisible, and so should technologies be in schools. What we mean by that is that most of what we learn is done invisibly. It's not done through formal instruction. It's done through informal, non-formal, or even serendipitous experiences, but not through formal instruction. If we are to use technologies intelligently, then they need to enhance the possibilities afforded by invisible spaces. Mobile technologies, for example, really open these spaces. They allow us to break free and outside of classrooms, which means we need to rethink time and space for learning and time and space for education. Again, this means we need to become smart about technology and understanding what technology is. And so instead of putting technology in the forefront in schools, as we have been doing, where it obscures learning, we need to invisibilize technologies so the learning can become much more visible. It's a simple fact that we cannot manage knowledge. Too often, however, particularly in education, we tend to commingle information with knowledge. So to be very clear, data are bits and pieces here and there from which we form into information. Knowledge is about taking this information and creating personal meaning from it. Innovation is when we take action with our individual knowledges that create new value. Schools are obsessed with measuring and managing knowledge. but we simply cannot measure what's inside somebody's head. The moment we try to manage our knowledge, we're degrading it back down to information. So perhaps we need to manage less and instead attend to more knowledge construction. We affirm that the network is the learning. In a rapidly changing world, we cannot plan our approaches to teaching carefully. Rather, they emerge quite fluidly. We learn best when we flow across different networks and different configurations of networks, virtual and social. And as our networks expand, so do our possibilities for learning, and also learning all the time. This is not only good for growing our individual knowledge, but for also creating and supporting social knowledge as well. This is about forming connected learning experiences. And so when we come together, we need to ask the question, how can we better learn? How can we better solve problems? How can we create solutions that are bigger than any of us? And we believe the future belongs to nerds, geeks, makers, dreamers, and nomads. Now, I'm not saying that we should put the value of nerds and entrepreneurs above all others, and definitely not everybody should become an entrepreneur, but those who can go forward and build their own futures are at a distinct advantage as we face a future of increasing uncertainty. And this requires an incredible amount of innovative action from all of us. So we like to say we need more entrepreneurs. All right? Entrepreneurs connect their geekiness, they connect their knowledge and their passion to build the startups of their lives. And I believe they're creating tremendous social and cultural value as well. So at this event so far, we've had several people share their entrepreneur experiences with us, and they're really building the future. We must break the rules, but we can't just break the rules for the sake of breaking the rules. We have to know why first. Our school systems are built on cultures of obedience, enforced compliance, and complacency. And this limits our creativities of the students and staff. It is easier to be told what to do than to think for ourselves and do maybe what's right. We need to ask more questions. We need to build what we call a metacognitive awareness, that is, knowing what we do not know, having awareness of maybe what we should know. Because when we understand ourselves and our institutions better, we can make that break and create real, meaningful impacts. And most importantly, we must and can build cultures of trust in our schools and communities. The theme of trust is really weaving through these other points quite a bit. And we just feel that we cannot expect real changes in education as long as our systems are based on fear, anxiety, and distrust. And so if we're to build a collective capacity to transform education in our communities, we must trust each other. Educators, administrators, students, parents, businesses, governments, other elements of our community. I mean, really, all of us. And perhaps the greatest threat to education today is simply that we just do not trust each other. This needs to change. And so that's Manifesto 15. 19 days later, the conversation involving learning continues. Manifesto 15 is a set of principles. It's built for open discussion. It's built for remixing. It's built for sharing. And here's the best part. This is a conversation we all own. Take this document as a starting point, build your own ideas now, or create the manifesto of your life. We learned that we can build a collective capacity to evolve learning, but this requires a tremendous amount of trust from all of us to realize the vision. And we need to challenge the assumptions our learning systems are built on. We need to understand why, how, for what, and especially for whom we're learning or we're educating. So let me wrap up. While we may not be able to predict the future with any sort of precision, we can at least set the vision for the type of potential futures we create with others. And from this, we can take meaningful action today. Manifesto 15 is not a mirror to the past, but it's a prism that takes diverse spectrum of ideas together and feeds them into coherent vision. So we've set our vision. Mahatma Gandhi taught us, be the change you want to see. So our invitation remains open to join us and build community centered on trust and open dialogue as we work to change the face of education. The absurdity of the past ends now. Thank you.